This is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 360.
I think about how many layers, how many people, really intelligent, capable people. And then I wonder how many of them have called the customer service line. Because all it would take is one person with any level of decision-making influence to call that line. And again, this is their core value prop of having this card. And so that's what I mean, the disconnect between what goes on in the boardroom and what goes on at the front line is huge. And this is really important, Greg.
G'day, this is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 360. And our guest today is Jack Delosa, founder and chairman of The Entourage, on frameworks for success, building customer connection and raising capital from an investor's viewpoint. I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs. I believe there is a great chief in all of us, and that through listening to the stories, strategies and techniques of great CEOs and gurus, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work and life. The Inner Chief Podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO, like a true chief. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. On the Inner Chief Podcast, I bring these stories to life with deep diving CEO interviews, interspersed with minisodes covering key leadership challenges, so you will find your own path to greatness as an executive. In this episode, I chat to Jack Delosa. Jack is a successful entrepreneur, investor, and best-selling author, having founded The Entourage in 2010. It is now Australia's largest business growth agency, and through it, he has helped clients generate over $6 billion in revenue. Just 5 years prior, Jack had enrolled in a commerce and law degree, only to drop out 3 months later to found a marketing agency in Melbourne. Since then, he has been named on the Australian Financial Review's Young Rich list 5 times and has founded and invested in multiple businesses across diverse industries such as biotechnology and even aviation. Jack is the author of Unprofessional and Elevate and stars in the TV show Entrepreneurs, in which he shares insights from top business leaders. In today's masterclass, Jack will share how to use frameworks to guide you to solve a unique problem in the market, the benefits and pitfalls of raising capital versus bootstrapping your own business, the crucial role of both employee and customer feedback in continually refining your business operations, and the immense value of personal growth practices such as meditation for maintaining resilience and focus. Chiefs, without further ado, let's hear from the remarkable Jack Delosa. All right, Chiefs, welcome to the Inner Chief Podcast. We have the one and only Jack Delosa with us today. Jack, welcome to the Inner Chief Podcast.
Thanks, Greg. Great to be here.
Now, Jack's got a remarkable background. He's an entrepreneur, investor, best-selling author, best-selling podcast. You're the founder and chairman of Australia's largest business coaching business, The Entourage. You have over 800,000 members globally. One of the things we want to get to today is there's a little line on your homepage that says, building a profitable business is a skill. Right, you and I align on that. I love that because it talks to, even if you're not winning now, we just got to add some skills to the mix. We'll talk more about your profile as we go through, but there's a lot, Jack. It's been a great career so far. We have a tradition at the Inner Chief. We just love to know where our chiefs start. Can you tell a bit of a story that sums up your childhood and early life?
The most formative component of my childhood, my parents ran a not-for-profit organisation called Breaking the Cycle, and this was when I was like 4 years of age. They would take long-term unemployed youth at risk, off the street, out of jails, and they'd put them through a life training program, an employability program, and then they'd facilitate them into employment. And they could only see a finite number of young adults each year, so they deliberately choose those from the most challenged of backgrounds. Even though they decided to choose, the people coming from the worst kind of positions, They were the most successful job placement agency for long-term unemployed youth in the country. So they were very, very good at what they did. Mum was the head teacher, dad was the managing director. And so that was the world I grew up in. I would not go to school and I would sit in Mum's classroom as she taught personal development and life skills. Breaking the Cycle was a not-for-profit organisation, and so they were reliant primarily on government funding. After an election, government restructured the way they issued capital out to not-for-profits. Breaking the Cycle were unsuccessful in securing funding under the new structure, and so the organisation collapsed. And so it was a huge part of my childhood, to the point where, it was a huge part of our family's life. We had a couple of the young adults that had come through Breaking the Cycle living with us. I was probably 7 or 8 years of age at this point. They were 18 and 21. And so it was such a big component of my childhood. It was such a big component of our family. And then it was gone. And I remember feeling a deep sense of frustration and injustice. When it collapsed, I think I was about 11 years of age. Deep sense of frustration and injustice at who decided that money was better allocated elsewhere. And so Breaking the Cycle taught me that the traditional system doesn't work for everybody. And when you surround people with TLC and the right support and give them a playbook, it doesn't matter what their background is, you can usually help them. And then the collapse of Breaking the Cycle is where I get my commercial side from, because, literally from the age of 10 or 11, I've wanted to build companies that make a difference in the world and be companies that are incredibly financially successful, because I want to be able to spend as much as possible getting our message out there. I want to be able to spend as much as possible recruiting the best talent from all around the world. And so that gives you a real insight into kind of my whole being, if you like. I'm a deeply commercial person because I've had to become. But what's driving me is probably that childlike belief that we can all make a difference.
Jack, I'm thinking about these young kids that your parents were looking after. And what an amazing calling too. That is just such a great, incredible gift.
It is.
I'm thinking about these young folk and you as a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old.
Yeah.
When I was that age, I was learning off people that age. They were like my heroes.
Right.
Right. Like, you look at the older kids at school.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet some of these young kids, even though they were coming out of really difficult circumstances, and go, wow, I'm learning things even off them?
Absolutely.
What did you learn off those kids?
Rebellion.
Ah, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And my parents, I remember asking my parents, what students are your favorites? And they said the rebels.
Scoundrels.
And so, yeah, it was built into my DNA from day one.
Yeah. Yeah. I did wonder if that might have been playing a role, because you didn't make it through uni.
No,
right?
yeah.
Okay. What was your first ever job?
Kitchen hand at a butcher.
Oh,
yeah, it was glamorous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My first job was taking the freezing cold chickens at a chicken store, like Brody's Chicken, which is a bit like Red Rooster.
Right.
And pulling them out of the frozen ice, doing the wings, getting them ready to put in the oven. It was
Mate, that's got glamour written all over it.
Yeah. Horrible job. Okay, your first ever cut?
Holden Commodore.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a beast.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Gone now. Gone
now. Correct.
Okay.
The good old days.
Yeah, the good old days. Okay, let's talk about this rebellion university kind of journey. You got through school, you went off to uni. It didn't take long, though, for you to perhaps realise that your journey was going another way, right? What happened to make you go, no, I'm not going to stay here? Because it's a fairly big decision, right, to quit something you've had a couple of years at, and getting a sense of who you are. You've done it with a real conviction about something else you believe in. So what was that moment?
I dropped out of university because I love learning. And so at university, I had 16 contact hours a week. And so my question, what was I supposed to be doing I had jobs and stuff, but I wanted more, and I wanted better quality education. and I wanted to go faster. University these days, and even back when I was there, which was almost 20 years ago now, university is more set up to keep students there for the duration of their degree than it is to deliver good quality education. And so if you look at something like a physical science degree 30 years ago, there was, they talked to you about 360 different components in the human body. Now they talk to you about 30. Why do they do that? Because they want to make the degree easier, because when it's too difficult, people leave and they no longer get the fees. Mm-hmm. And so it is set up and structured to keep you there. It is not set up and structured to develop you as a person. It is not set up and structured to develop you as a professional. It's set up and structured to maximize the fees that I can generate from you. And so I determined that what I was learning, I was doing a dual degree comm law. What I was learning in the commerce side of things was decades out of date, incredibly boring. I could tell even as an 18-year-old that it wasn't going to translate to the real world. And so I left to start my own business.
This was the beginning of MBE?
No, MBE came later. Before MBE, there was, 3 or 4 years of false starts and failures, which was my university. That was my apprenticeship.
There it is. Yeah.
And that's my view in business is we all do our apprenticeship. It's just some of us do it in the real world. And so, my curriculum was self-driven, and my accountability was the market. And that was an incredibly valuable training ground for me. And in a sense, it's probably, for people like me, it's probably what we need. We need that interaction with the market. We need that sense of reality. We need that sense of consequence in order to be motivated to really lean into it.
Okay. I was thinking about going down the university rabbit hole, but I think it would just frustrate the hell out of both of us.
And it would take the next 90 minutes.
Forgive us, we're not going to go down there. You know what we're thinking, okay? Eventually, though, you did start the MBE group. This helped small to medium-sized businesses raise capital from investors.
Correct.
Okay. You rose over $300 million. It became one of Australia's fastest-growing businesses.
Yeah.
Why did you focus on the raising capital?
For me, it was opportunistic. And so the background of MBE is during that apprenticeship period, those 4 years with false starts and failures, I had determined I had the passion, the drive, and the hunger. I didn't have the commercial skills. And so I needed a mentor. And throughout my teenage years, I read a magazine called Wealth Creator Magazine. I read it religiously, like most teenage boys have certain magazines under their bed. The magazines under my bed were Wealth Creator. And so people like John Ilhan from Crazy John's on the front cover, who at the time was worth $300 million. And that was my Bible as a teenager. And so the person who started and ran Wealth Creator Magazine was a guy called Reuben Buchanan. And Reuben sold Wealth Creator Magazine and went out and essentially became a corporate advisor, helping companies to raise capital and acquire businesses and build value and exit at that kind of medium company level. And then he was engaged by a promotion company to start teaching that stuff from stage. And so he kind of did it in his spare time just cause. And so he was delivering a speaking gig in Melbourne. He was from Sydney. And I reached out to him and I said, I know you're not from Melbourne. I am. I know you haven't run events before. I have. Do you want me to come along and help you on the night for free? And he said, sure. And so I went along and I helped him. And then because for Reuben, the speaking thing wasn't a big deal. He was such a successful guy in his own right. He kind of wasn't taking the speaking thing very seriously. And so afterwards I said to him, who's doing your sales for you after this event? And I knew the answer was going to be nobody because he wasn't invested. I said, okay, cool. Let me do that for you. Send me the list of the people that were in the room. He was holding a weekend in Sydney in a couple of weeks. I said, I'll manage it for you. Give me a commission if you'd like. And I made him $40,000 in the next 2 weeks in sales. And $40,000 isn't a lot of money, particularly wasn't a lot of money for Reuben at the time, but I think about this sometimes. It must have been strange for him, this kid coming out of nowhere, offering to help, generating $40K in 2 weeks that he wouldn't have otherwise seen. And so after that, he said, come to the weekend. I want to have a meeting with you. And then the conversation was, let's start a business that does this. You're going to run it and drive it and do everything. And I'll show up and be the talent and pull in my networks as it's required. And so it was opportunistic for me in that I wanted to run a real business. I wanted to do it with somebody that I feel I could learn from. And it was the perfect partnership at the time.
What was the best advice he ever gave you?
Ruben isn't a big one on giving advice. You learn from Ruben from osmosis and being around him and watching how he operates. And it was funny at the time, I haven't thought about this in a long time, but at the time I remember the people I was hanging out with prior to Ruben would always say to me, whenever I meet someone, I think, how can I make money from them? And Ruben would specifically say, whenever I meet someone, I think, how can I make this person money? I thought, isn't that interesting? It's a completely different question, but it shone through in everything he did. He could call anybody, any brand, any business and set up any partnership with anybody, partly because of Wealth Creator, but partly because he had that intent of, if I'm coming to talk to you, I know how I'm going to make you money. And so that approach, that selflessness was one of the biggest lessons from Rubes.
I want to link this back because there's a great quote, I'm pretty sure it was Einstein, and he said, stop trying to be a person of success and try and be a person of value.
Perfect.
I'm pretty sure that was Einstein.
Yeah.
And a lot of our listeners, some of them are business owners, but the most work in corporate world, and they're probably going, why have we got someone who specializes in entrepreneurship?
Yeah.
And this is why.
Yeah.
Because people can feel it when you're there to get something off them.
Definitely.
And every time you meet someone, if you were trying to add value, and that is your sole focus, to be curious about how you can do that, that is how you build great brand, a magnetic sort of network around you that want to be around you, to learn from you and spend time with you and work with you.
100%. And brand is reputation. You know, as a business, I think brand is kind of the culmination of the difference that your products have made to the lives of your customers. But particularly when you start talking about personal brand, it's reputation. Ruben had and has an immaculate reputation.
Yeah.
And always, everybody respected him. Everybody wanted to work with him because he would always do the right thing by everybody.
I want to get back to that line you just said about brand. The delta, the difference between, the difference you make in someone's life?
In a business, I think your brand is the cumulative effect of your products or services over a period of time.
Yeah. In someone's life. Yeah.
And as a personal brand, it's also that, but it's also your personal reputation. People know where you're coming from. They can sense intent.
Yeah.
And so I think having sound intent when you're approaching any situation is really important.
Okay, cool. I want to just quickly we're going to go into talking about business and bootstrapping and capital and all that, but I just want to go back, if you don't mind. We spoke about this wonderful work your parents are doing, and you actually mentioned something there. It was, I don't know, I'm sure actually it was definitely not a throwaway line, but you said, we educate them, we teach them some frameworks and some skills. Almost everything you teach is backed around framework, skill, mindset, that kind of whole world, right? It's all, you don't just see it in what you do, even though I haven't done any of your stuff yet, right?
Yeah.
But can you talk to the importance of, and this is also, let's have a bit of a shot at the universities while we're at it.
Why not?
Right. Where's like the frameworks that make decision-making easier, that provide that blueprint or roadmap to success, that most people are given a terrible roadmap to begin with, or no roadmap at all, and spend most of their life guessing. Now, you build roadmaps through experience, through the world of hard knocks like you did in the early days, through osmosis. Can you just speak to the importance of frameworks and roadmaps?
The hardest thing for anybody is a blank piece of paper, because if you have to create from a blank canvas, you're essentially creating through trial and error, and it's the hardest way to learn, it's the longest way to learn, and it's the most expensive way to learn.
Yeah.
How I see roadmaps and frameworks, I see it as a distillation of somebody else's experience that is condensing 3 decades of experience into something that I might be able to implement in 3 months. And so it's an accelerant. And this is how the whole world advances, right? It took Edison 2 years and thousands of experiments to get the light bulb right. These days, we don't need to know what those experiments were. We don't need to know everything that he went through to get it. We just go and push the light switch. And so what we do to advance as a civilization, what we do to advance as individuals, is we buy other people's mistakes. We buy other people's experience so that we can get the benefit of it without the decades of trial and error behind it. And so a crazy thing for me to observe is people who don't invest in coaching, people who don't invest in mentorship. I spend more money on development of myself and my team than anybody I know. And I think it's one of the main reasons that we go as fast as we do, because for me, I see it as it's such a logical, rational equation for me. If I can spend $100,000 and it helps me avoid $500,000 worth of mistakes and generate an extra $500,000 on the top, well, then I'm a 10x in front. And so that $100,000 invested in development or skill development or solving a particular problem is far better invested in my own growth than it is in property, than it is in crypto, than it is in shares, than it is in any other asset class. And so frameworks and roadmaps are an accelerant and a shortcut to get to where you want to go faster, cheaper, and easier.
There's another little angle on them that I've found really helpful. Everything you said is so big. And I love the analogy of comparing it to other asset classes.
Yeah.
Because certainly in the corporate world, most people, if you ask them, well, who owns your development? Who's in charge of your personal development? They'll say HR.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, it is a scary thought because it says to me, you're actually not in control at all of your development and your career, right? The thing that I find very interesting, and because we're going to link this into bootstrapping a business, investing in business, assessing a business in a minute, but one of the most important skills of a really senior executive is being able to accurately assess a business performance or a aspect of a business performance, be it marketing or operations or finance or legal, and quickly go, this is the problem.
Yes.
Right, to be able to walk in the room very quickly within 10 minutes and go, here's the problem.
100%. I couldn't agree more with that.
And you cannot do it without frameworks because it's too complex, right? And then the second part of it is that it gives you additional confidence. It makes life easier for you. It's more relaxing because you can walk in and go, oh, that all makes sense, right? The cost of misdiagnosis is huge.
Years, decades.
Pain, right?
Yeah.
The pain of stress. And that's probably, I think you didn't mention before when you said, $100,000, great investment financially.
Right.
The stress.
Yeah, the angst saved.
Yeah. Chief, do you want to know how to give and receive feedback like an elite sporting coach? I've bridged the gap between elite sport and business now for about 15 years, and I've been taking some of those lessons from sport into business. We've turned that into a really cool downloadable PDF, and there's also some accompanying episodes of the podcast. Just go to chiefmaker.com/feedback. There's a really awesome PDF. It's got templates, it's got scripts, process, things to consider about how to give feedback, prepare for feedback, and foster a culture in your team. chiefmaker.com/feedback. I wonder if you've met thousands and thousands of business owners. Do any just jump into your mind as people who are just had this incredible ability to just within minutes go, that's the problem? Anyone jump to mind? And what do you think they were doing?
No one individual comes
Stands
to
out,
mind. Yeah. I think it's a triangulation of a few things. I think it's number one is like instinct and intelligence. Two is fusing that with a lot of experience. And three is it helps to be somebody that has a very intense and fast feedback loop in their life, because you tend to learn and grow a lot faster. And so let me give you an example of that as a business owner, and I'm sure your executives in your audience will be able to relate to it a lot. When you're a business owner, every decision you make has dire consequences one way or another, and they're relatively immediate. And so your feedback loop for your decisions, your words, your actions is immediate, and it's quite intense. And so your rate of growth is so much faster than somebody that's not as invested or is not as hungry to learn or hasn't put themselves in a position where they've got that feedback loop. Part of the problem with being in a position where you don't have a set up feedback loop in your career or your life or your business is we live in a culture where everybody's just too fucking nice to each other. And this political correctness thing has gotten to a point where we no longer give each other honest feedback. And so what I see is so many people moving through life, career, I think HR's in charge of my own development, moving through, life and career without any feedback loop, much less a fast and intense feedback loop.
Is there a good way to precipitate that? If you're in a senior role and you don't have a great feedback loop, right? Maybe it's too slow. Your people aren't giving you feedback. You're getting nothing from the customer. You're sitting there going, Jack's talking about this feedback loop. What might I do to start building that?
I'd set up 360s with my team. If you haven't been doing them, I'd do it every 2 months. I'd get to a point where you're doing them either quarterly or every 6 months. But I do them more frequently to begin with because I want a faster feedback loop. I'd also initiate that with some honest conversation saying, loving working with you. I'm really working on myself as a manager and a leader, which a lot of managers and leaders don't like saying, but it actually does open the door for their direct reports to understand that they are coming from a place of growth and service and putting any ego aside, which often helps your directs do the same thing. And so I'd talk to my direct reports, I'd put in place 360s, and then I would go out and talk to the customers. It's truly bewildering to me how many executives sit in large corporations in fancy buildings overlooking Sydney Harbour, assuming what the customer wants. And it's startling how wrong they are. I could give you so many examples of this just in my day-to-day life. Very anecdotally and unscientifically, we've just moved into a building in Barangaroo. It's beautiful. It's arguably one of the best buildings in Sydney. Everything about it is so not intuitive because it's been developed by a large corporation. Everything from swiping into the building to getting up the elevators to how the communal spaces are managed. You can tell it's how the gym is set up. You can you just walk through it. You spend a day there, and nothing here works. The building's beautiful. How it functions is terrible. You can tell every decision has been made by somebody that doesn't understand a gym, doesn't understand what swiping into a building intuitively or with ease looks like. And so it's a bit of a bugbear of mine because I see it everywhere. And I think that one of the biggest risks for executives and corporations is distance from customer. It's the number one thing that will kill you. And it might kill you slowly. It might be 40 or 50 years in terms of the demise or the decline of a business, probably a little bit faster these days. Engagement with customers, everything. And that's what's beautiful about an entrepreneurial business is there's just no escaping it.
You got to be close.
There's no passengers. There's no escaping the customer. You are, on sort of on the grindstone every single day. And that's challenging. Yeah. But in terms of feedback loop and rate of improvement, it's amazing.
There's this wonderful crossover here where what can big business learn from small and small learn from business?
Yes.
Yes. And this connection to customer.
Yes.
Is absolutely one of them.
Huge.
Right.
I was going to give you another example.
Yeah, go, please. Yeah.
Oh, mate. And again, very anecdotally, I'm kind of just venting and having a bit of fun now. But
let's go.
And I won't mention the name, but I'm no, I won't because I actually really like the brand, and I will continue to be a customer of the brand. Hopefully. But I'm a customer to one of the more what would you say kind of prestigious credit card brands.
Sure.
And one of the benefits of having this particular card is the concierge and the customer service that they offer. And this happened to me just last week. I was in the car and I was calling the concierge, and you come through to a automated voice recording. And the option that I wanted, which must be a pretty common one, I wanted to speak to them about some travel booking, wasn't on the list of options. And they didn't have an option for other or miscellaneous or anything else. And so I couldn't proceed. And so we kind of hit a dead end. I hung up, I called back, and then I gave them a dummy. You know, I chose one of their 4 options, even though it wasn't just to get through to somebody.
Sure.
And then the phone kept disconnecting. And I thought to myself, this is I'm not sure what the market cap would be, but I'm quite sure they'd be on the NASDAQ, and I'm quite sure it'll be in the tens, if not hundreds of billions. And I just imagine the board sitting around and what they're thinking about and talking about and the spreadsheets that they're looking at. And I think about how many layers of management that exist in that organization and the size of their salaries in each country. Let's just call it, even the size of their management salaries in Australia. I think about how many layers, how many people, really intelligent, capable people. And then I think, I wonder how many of them have called the customer service line. Because all it would take is one person with any level of decision-making influence to call that line. And again, this is their core value prop of having this card. And so that's what I mean. The disconnect between what goes on in the boardroom and what goes on at the front line is huge. And this is really important, Greg. The quality of a business is the quality of what happens at the front line. It's not about how smart we are in the boardroom. It's not about how good we are and how intelligent we sound in executive meetings. The quality of a business is the quality of what happens at the front line. And so everything should be about customer.
There is something we've been dancing around here the last half an hour or so, and that is value and value proposition. And what your line then is beautiful, right? All the value happens at the front line.
Yeah.
The value exchange.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'll give you money. This is the service I get for it, or the product I get for it in response.
Yeah.
How often do you come across a business owner, a senior member of that team, where they actually can't even enunciate the value proposition of the organization in the eyes of the customer? Is this a big problem?
Huge. And I think that would be most of the time people can't articulate what the value prop is for the customer, why customers come to us, what are their frustrations, what are their fears, what are their wants, what are their dreams, what are their immediate needs, what are their long-term wants. And what's equally as scary and worrying for me is those that can articulate those things but seem to have no regard for how to implement and execute them in such a way that's effectual on the front line.
Right.
Because we can talk value prop, we can talk company values, and it doesn't translate to do. And so I think that's part of the disconnect.
Okay, we might come back to value prop because it's a big topic. I'm seeing a lot of it.
For the next one, we've got universities and we've got value prop.
Yeah.
Episode 2 and 3.
I'm seeing a bit more and more. And I think it's a value proposition between company and customer. I think it's a value proposition for individuals internally with their internal stakeholders.
Yes.
And I think partly it's because of the work from home, because people are just a little bit more disconnected from their peers, from their customer.
Yeah.
Not that I'm totally against work from home, but I just think
it
is making this more difficult. Than
Absolutely.
It's ever been, right?
Absolutely.
And so if it's more difficult than it's ever been, and you're in that place and you are working from home, then you need to work harder at staying connected to customer and stakeholders.
Yes.
Even harder than you ever have before.
Definitely.
Don't get lazy on that front.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, I want to get into the Entourage a bit in a minute. So you've started a business and bootstrapped it without capital, right? A few guys in the early days and then MBA, you join up with someone. Since then, you've also now an investor. So now, so that you've attracted capital and grown businesses and you've been an investor.
Yeah.
So 3 different types, right? Both sides of the fence, different experiences. I'd love if you could explain the difference between just 1 or 2 differences that are really important if you're just going to bootstrap as opposed to raising cap.
Yeah.
If you're a business owner or an executive who's doing that, right, deciding not to raise cap but just go for it, the two kind of differences that are really important to consider in that space.
The biggest misconception around raising capital from investors is that it's the win in and of itself. And it's not. It's when the hard work starts. It's just that you're now working hard with added pressure because you've got external investors. And so it's not the silver bullet. My advice to anybody looking to raise capital is raise capital as late as you possibly can, or preferably not at all. The difference between raising money and not raising money is when you raise money, you would do so as an accelerant, meaning the dilutionary effect of the money that's coming in is going to be less than the gain and the accelerant that I will gain from that capital.
Sure. Yep.
And so if I was to send you $1 million right now, would you know how to turn it into $3, $4, $5, $6 million? And if you would, and you can raise money from me at a decent valuation that doesn't dilute you too much, then it might be something you'd consider. The benefit of not raising capital, and these days I lean more towards not raising capital if you can avoid it. And the reason for that is two things. Firstly, when you raise money, it lulls people into a false sense of security. When you're bootstrapping and you have to be very conscientious with all of your resources, whether it's money, time, recruits, meetings, every single resource, when you have to be conscientious, what happens is you are wrestling and you are fighting the clock in that you need to find product to market fit, service to market fit. You need to find message to market fit. You need to develop a sales process that maximizes conversions. There's all these things within the business that need to be dialed in. And when you've got cash at bank, it can prolong the necessary wrestling to make real progress on the things that matter most. You're less motivated, right? And so there's a wrestling with the fundamentals of the business model that needs to occur that is often delayed when we raise money. And the other thing that happens when we raise money is people start getting fancy. It's like, should we launch in New Zealand? Should we launch in this? It's like the unit economics of your base business model aren't sound yet. And so whether you raise money or not, that's the first job.
Yeah.
And in my experience and observation, that happens faster without capital. The second reason why you might consider not raising money is when you raise money, you need to take into consideration other people's inputs and contributions and all of that kind of stuff. And so you're not as much of a captain of your own fate as you were a moment ago. And so it's not the win in and of itself. The win in and of itself is, can I acquire customers in a profitable way? Can I convert them at a conversion that's best in class? And then can I keep them and extend my lifetime value with them because there's a connection there and we're adding value to them? If you can do that, money will never be a problem again. And so particularly today, if you're good at digital marketing, you don't need to raise capital because you can develop funnels that self-liquidate so quickly that there's your capital raising. You're just doing it through revenue rather than investors.
There's something you said in there around unit economics of product. This is something I want to touch on a bit because I bet it comes up a lot in the entourage, is core business as opposed to, so if we just imagine a little circle in that is core business, that which you are best at, which your business has been built for, that your operations are set up for, that your marketing is designed for, that the whole business model supports. And then, like a lot of business owners who get a bit excited.
Don't get me started.
You know what I'm They just look over here and there's this shiny thing off to the right. And they forget this thing they've laboured over.
I heard a good saying the other week. It worked so well, I stopped doing it.
Yes. Oh, crying out loud. Yeah, this happens all the time, right? What is your counsel? How to Because this doesn't happen just at small business. If someone's a small business owner, they're doing this, don't worry. Big companies with massive amounts of capital do this all the time. And I can tell you the vast majority of that capital is a complete waste. If they did a return on capital, they would not meet a decent hurdle.
No.
So if we go back to your counsel, your advice.
The number one thing that slows business owners down is that we are so optimistic and we are so in a hurry that we try to do everything. And we want everything done, and we want everything done yesterday. And when we try to do everything, we end up doing nothing well. And so counterintuitively and ironically, it's our need to go fast that slows us down ultimately. Fundamentally, the businesses that go fast are the ones that focus. I say there's 3 rules to growth. Number 1 is focus. Number 2 is focus. And number 3 is focus. So often, a business owner, I imagine it's the same with executives in corporations, we come up against a plateau. And our first thought is to think, what else can we do? And so we start thinking laterally, and it's the wrong way to think, particularly as a small to medium-sized business owner. The first thing we should think is, how do we do better? Meaning, how do we do what we're already doing, just better? And so when I come into a business, whether it's a turnaround job, whether it's to maximize profitability, whether it's to build value to exit, doesn't matter what it is, I come back to one thing, and that is customer journey. How many steps are in the customer journey, and how do we get better at each piece? And in any given business, there's maximum 6, 8, sometimes 12 steps in a customer journey. And I think that if you just obsess over those 6 to 8 steps, you can create a business that's 10x what it is today, just doing those steps better. And so the first step is, don't look sideways to do something different. The first step is better. How do we do what we're already doing better? The next step is more. Okay, once we've got those dialed in, and the customer journey might look like we do content, that's step 1. Step 2 is we run an ad. Step 3 is we have landing pages. Step 4 is we have a lead magnet. Step 5 is we have a phone call. Step 6 is we have another phone call. Step 7 is we deliver. Step 8 is we retain and extend lifetime value. And step 8 or 9 is we turn that person into an advocate once they've wrapped up with it. It's 8 or 9 steps. And so once we've dialed in those conversions and we're actually good at it, the second thing is, how do we do more of that? So more volume. People seriously underestimate the level of volume required to be successful, particularly once something's dialed in. It should just be crank it. And so it's better, then it's more, then it's different. But unfortunately, we go to different too quickly because there's a quote from Carl Jung. He said, most people don't see God because they don't look low enough.
Oh,
and
that's so good.
It's a beautiful quote.
I haven't heard that from you.
Yeah. And it's the same in business. We don't grow our businesses because we don't look low enough. You don't need to expand into the United States. You don't need to launch a magazine. You don't need to start your third business.
No, you don't.
You just need to work out, where are you letting your current marketing sales funnels down? Where are you letting your current customers down? And do better, then do more. And once you're doing that really well at scale, then maybe we look sideways to do something differently.
Certainly from our experience in our business, that has been so true. The more we've focused, it has got easier.
Yeah.
It has got better.
Yeah.
Everything about it. This distraction from core, I like what you said. It was better, more, then different.
Correct.
But it's probably better, more, better, more, better, more, better, more.
Yeah, that would be my preference. Yeah, exactly.
Then
Yes.
maybe different, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that I like I'll give you an ultimatum. Let's say you've got 5% of market share. That'd be pretty amazing in most markets, right? Would you prefer would it be easier and more profitable to go to 7% market share or go to something new and get 2% of something new?
Right.
I wouldn't know anyone that would say, certainly go to something new that you know nothing about.
You wouldn't know anyone that says that if they think about it correctly. But just about everybody says that, which is what you and I are discussing right now.
Yeah.
It's the go-to. We love chasing shiny things. And so what's better than shiny things is, ask yourself the question, what's the biggest constraint in this business right now? And if you can't answer that question, then the biggest constraint in the business right now is you.
Yeah.
Business is a game of growing from constraint to constraint. We just grow into bigger and better problems. That's all we do. And so it's exactly what you said earlier. I just fundamentally agree with it vehemently, which is, a good executive walks in the room within 10 minutes, they go, this is the problem.
Thank you. That's what I was going to link it back to is if you're not sure if you don't know where your bottleneck is,
that 100%.
Use your framework. That's what it's there for.
And then one of the things that I've gotten my business is really disciplined at is we don't want to be working on 8 or 10 constraints at any given moment. I want 1, maybe 2, maybe 3. And once they're unlocked, we'll then assess what's the next constraint.
That's the Toyota way.
Or what's the next constraint.
Yeah, that's the Toyota way.
Right.
Right. The whole Lean Six Sigma, all of that was around bottleneck control.
Yes.
Right. And the guy that started that, guy called Edwards Deming, he was the guy that bought TQM from America. He made it in Japan.
Yeah.
And the annual quality award for excellence in quality in Japan is named after an American.
Yeah.
Right. And so he just spoke about that.
Yeah.
And it is such an important thing to get our heads around. I want to just philosophize with you for 1 minute. This is non-scientific, but real gut feel instinct, watching people more and more. Is what is the root cause of executives and business owners not being able to see the forest through the trees here? If we go beyond not knowing frameworks, what I've watched over the last 10 years, maybe even a bit longer, and experienced myself in my own life, has been this speeding up of the world from phones and iPads and emails and social media and the news cycle. And we are addicted to speed and addicted to this life of being so busy. When was the last time you met a friend who said, and I said, how you going? They said, oh, bored.
Yeah.
No one said that.
Yeah. It's always busy.
Everyone's just busy. And in busy, it's really hard to do slow as smooth as fast. That kind of thing you're talking about.
Yep.
How do you manage speed? Like in your own, this is your own managing your mental state. Because I can see you're being able to switch between fast thinking but then stepping back quite quickly. How do you manage that more on a weekly kind of basis?
I think it comes from a few things for me. I think that I went through some really hard years in business in 2016 where it was either learn how to be more mindful and grounded or I wasn't going to last. And so out of necessity, I started to meditate. I want to use the word religiously, I mean that kind of metaphorically.
It's okay.
And for me, that was probably the most profound personal ritual that I've ever found and every entrepreneur, every executive will say the same thing. Jack, I can't meditate. I've got a busy mind. It's like we've all got a busy mind, this expectation that you're just going to sit down one day for the first time and meditate and not have a thought for an hour or 20 minutes is completely unfair and unrealistic. And, if you grew up in an ashram from the age of 4 and all you've done is meditate and cook and clean for the last 30 years, then you could sit down and not have a thought for 48 hours. But if you operate in a Western civilization and you've got businesses or departments and mortgages and kids, you're going to have thoughts. And so the whole I've got a busy mind just isn't an excuse. We all have busy minds, and that's why meditation is needed. And so for me, meditation was really effective because it improves your sleep, it reduces your cortisol, it makes you more joyful, it enables you to deal so much better with stress, both internal and external, and it helps you remain grounded and present. And so I think that's probably one of the rituals for me that's enabled me. I could be sitting in pretty much any given circumstance and remain present and remain grounded and remain connected to myself. It's really hard to knock me off center, and a large part of that comes from things like meditation.
What is your practice?
So I do Vedic meditation, which is meditating with a mantra, which is a sound that has no meaning. So a really common mantra that most people are familiar with is Om, Om, Om. You see a Vedic meditation teacher, they'll give you a personalized mantra. And so you kind of repeat it over and over again in your mind. And that helps for people with busy minds because it stills the mind and it steals the mind, and so it gives you something to focus on, and before you know it, you're in this kind of transcendental state of meditation and rest. And so best practice is 20 minutes twice a day. Do I do 20 minutes twice a day every day? Absolutely not. Back in 2000, from 2016 to say 2019, I did it, as I said, I did it religiously, even to the point where, a Saturday or Sunday, and, I was going through a pretty stressful period, but I'd get to a Saturday and I might meditate for kind of 3 hours because there was nothing else that I would rather be doing because I found it that useful. And so, like anything, it's a tool and you go through kind of seasonalities with your usage of it. But best practice is 20 minutes twice a day.
I would say now, so I meditate as well, and I use one of the apps, Insight Timer.
Yep, same.
We had one of the co-founders of that, Nick, on the show a while.
He is a legend. I did a meditation retreat with Nick.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
both as students. I've got a lot of time for Nick.
And I've noticed in hindsight, if I have a particular period where it's really, really busy, I notice quite quickly that my temper gets a bit shorter.
Yep.
I don't handle home as well, like with noisy kid, like a really noisy home. I'm just not myself.
Yep.
Like, how did I get to this place? The fundamentals. I didn't meditate for like a couple of weeks. I thought I got this. I don't need it. You do. You just need it, right? So, yes.
That's my deeper answer to your question.
Yeah.
Is how do I remain grounded, or what do I do during a stressful period? My universal and consistent answer over 2 decades is I come back to the basics.
Yeah.
Am I meditating? Am I sleeping? If I'm going through a particularly stressful period, I cut out all alcohol. I cut out or extremely minimize any sugar. These sound like small, like sugar might sound like a small thing, but it's not, and they compound. Am I training? Am I eating well? Am I spending time with my girls? And so the answer for me, it's immediately clear to me when I start edging off center, and my playbook is the same every time. I come back to the most boring and basic fundamentals that we all know we should be doing.
Yep.
But if something's easy to do, it's easy not to do, and I just make sure I get religious with them.
Fantastic. Let's talk about the entourage. You've got this line that says, we're on a mission to empower entrepreneurs by giving them everything they need to build a great business and live a meaningful life. Take it back to the piece earlier about skills. 800,000 odd businesses around the world. If someone is thinking about starting a business, right? They haven't started one yet. We'll talk about if someone has started, but if someone has not started a business, 2 questions they should be able to answer or ask themselves before they start.
If you wanted me to invest in your restaurant, hypothetically, if I pose this question to the viewers, what's the number one thing you think I would be looking for? Do you think I'd be looking for, a really good menu or a really good ambiance or a really great head chef? And the answer is the number one indicator that is going to determine the success or otherwise of your restaurant is, have you found a hungry crowd? And so the first question that people who want to start businesses need to be able to answer is, what's the problem you're uniquely qualified to solve? And the second question then leads to, how do you plan to solve it better than others?
Yeah, I like it. Okay. They've started a business and they've hit they don't know what, right? They're in that, oh my God, they're just spinning wheels. They're living on a prayer. Let's quote one of the greats. They're living on a prayer and just hoping, by all hope. And maybe the cash is starting to run out, but then they get in too deep if they don't make a move fast. What's a question they need to ask themselves to shift them out of the wheel they're on of not changing?
what's the biggest constraint in this business right now that, if solved, would make the biggest impact?
Great. Okay. Let's go to a scenario where we've got multiple business owners, right? Where it gets more tricky, right? When you've got 2 or 3 in partnership or something like that. If you're thinking about starting out in that world, what do the 2 or 3 business owners need to agree up front that will stop the almost guaranteed issues 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the track?
How are we going to mediate and resolve conflict when it inevitably comes up?
Great. What would you recommend is the best way to do that?
To be honest, I don't have a firm view on that. I've, for the last 15 years, run businesses where I'm a benevolent dictator. And so take whatever I say with a grain of salt. But a better question for me, given my lack of qualification on the answer, might be, what would I do if I was going to business with 2 or 3 people? What I would do is I would ask ChatGPT to give me a list of the top 10 most common causes of conflict between co-founders. I would then audit that list and see if I thought it was sound, and I'd socialize it with my potential co-founders. I'd then go and find the best lawyer that I could in shareholder agreements, and I would, if there's 3 potential co-founders and a lawyer or 2 between the 4 or 5 of us, develop a document that becomes like a constitution, if you like, whereby we really bottle how decisions are going to be made and what happens when we're gridlocked.
Yep. Outstanding. Right, Chiefs, more from Jack in a minute. Now, recently I spoke to Angela Tsoukatos, a vastly experienced executive team member and leader. We spoke about pivotal career moments, how to focus on core business, and the most effective ways the board and C-suite can work together. Here's what Angela had to say about enhancing communication between the senior management and directors.
We used to say we had a tendency to tell boards everything that we know rather than what they need to know, okay? And I think it's be honest and, as I said, don't filter, don't sugarcoat, you don't need to be alarmist, but be honest when things aren't going to plan. No boards want to be surprised. They don't want to be told 6 months later, a year later. I've found that over the years, boards react much better and in fact will help to try and solve an issue rather than if they're surprised.
You can listen to that incredible conversation with Angela by going to chiefmaker.com/356. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the podcast and check out all the other great interviews with our chiefs and gurus, as well as all the minisodes by going to chiefmaker.com/listen now. Righto, Chief, let's get back to Jack Delosa of The Entourage. One of the things that you speak on in large events and certainly you coach and develop is the marketing and branding of small businesses. In the early days of a business, or even if they're scaling, like, what do you think are the 2 or 3 most important things to get right in, let's say, branding and then linking that to the marketing plan?
When I think about branding, I think about it differently to how most people would think about it. And so I don't view branding as my logo and my corporate ID and the on-hold music that I make people listen to when we don't answer the phone. I think of branding as, what are the feelings my customers and target market associate with the business? And so brand is just an output of the collective touch points of the business. And by collective touch points, I mean, if you follow us on Instagram, it's the content that you see. If you visit the website, it's the pages that you peruse and how useful and succinct and clear that they are. If you have a conversation applying for one of our programs at The Entourage, if you're a business owner that's doing $1 million plus and you want some coaching from a group of people who've been there, done that experience, it's how well do we conduct that conversation, and how much do we teach you about your business just in the process of the application? It's the quality of the onboarding, it's the quality of the coaching, it's the quality of the frameworks, it's the quality of the connections that we're able to spark, it's the level of care that we show. Once you become an alumni of ours, for lack of a better term, it's how well do we stay in touch and maintain the relationship. And so I view brand as it's just a distillation of people's experience with the business. And so I don't view it as who do we say we are or who are we trying to portray ourselves as. I view it as who are we and how are we genuinely showing up? What are we doing every day? And so that is the sort of series of thoughts and questions I would be.
It's almost like the question to ask yourself is, have you had an experience of working with the business? Like almost put yourself in your customer's shoes. What is it like working with your business? That's the kind of question you probably should be asking.
100%.
Because you'll know your brand.
This is what a lot of the challenge that I see in a lot of small to medium-sized businesses is they think, okay, I want to build a personal brand. And so they start maybe producing and distributing more content on social media, for example. Meanwhile, they've got a growing base of unhappy customers, and that's doing more damage to their brand than their Instagram account could ever compensate for. And so brand starts with to what degree have we achieved a level of excellence in what we do? In fact, I'd say that's where brand starts and finishes.
Yeah. I like how you weaved in the word excellence there, because that's something that I spend a lot of time pondering, that mastery
same
kind of journey.
And just on that, Greg, because I do as well. And the reason I do is it's really difficult. And I think this is something, it is, isn't it? I think this is something that needs to be spoken about more because, you know, I got involved, I was learning about psychology and management leadership from a very, very young age. Like I was listening to the 1 Minute Manager on cassettes when I was like 11 years of age, right?
Wow.
Probably because of the Breaking the Cycle days.
Yeah.
And they talk a lot about excellence. And I thought, this is, you know, when you start a business, just make sure you're excellent at everything. And I thought it was going to be something that was, it's like I knew that I had the silver bullet, just be great at everything, right?
Yeah.
When you've been in business for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, you realize something, and that is excellence is excruciatingly difficult. And so it's really easy to talk about at conferences, and it's really easy to talk about on podcasts. And what makes it excellent, what makes it different, is that it's so incredibly painstakingly difficult to achieve that's why it is valued and that's why it stands out. And so I just want to language that because in the previous answer I said, you know, achieving a level of excellence. I don't say that flippantly, and I don't say that to I don't want to imply that that's an easy thing to do.
No, but it goes back to what you said earlier on about more.
Yes.
Get better,
Yes.
because it is a journey through white belt, yellow belt, red belt, green belt, black belt.
Yes.
First dan, second dan, third dan, fourth dan, fifth dan, sixth dan, seventh dan. It never actually stops.
100%.
Right? Black belt's probably only halfway
Yes.
to true mastery. Like if you've ever done any kind of martial art, you know, black belt's not hard to get.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Because then you get in the ring and you've got a seventh dan black belt and you feel like you've just been toyed with.
A really good friend of mine, a guy called Toby Pierce, talks about this in a way that's really interesting. And, you know, a common philosophy in personal development is progress equals happiness. And Toby challenges that in a really intelligent way. Toby co-founded Sweat, sold it for $400 million and recently brought it back with his previous co-founder, Kayla Itzines. Progress equals happiness. And Toby challenges that because he says, when you start to learn a new skill, you are as bad as you will ever be at it, and you will only get better in theory, right? And let's say you've got to learn 100 units to become excellent.
Yeah.
You might go from 0 to 80 units in 5 years. 80 to 90 units might take you 10 years, and then 90 to 100 units might take you 15 years.
Yeah.
And because the growth curve is not linear, it kind of plateaus out, and nowhere is it harder to get the gains than on the upper end of the scale, the closer you get to mastery.
Because there's less people who have been on the journey at that point too.
Yeah.
and more knocks and hitbacks and
Yeah, exactly. And the nuances become so much more the gains become so much more nuanced that it takes longer. And so if you need to feel always like you're making progress in order to be happy, then what you'll do is you'll continue to quit anything and everything before you reach mastery, because you want the energy of new. When we do something new, and this comes back to what we we're talking about before in terms of people wanting different, when you do something new, there's a fast energy to it. There's a shiny energy to it. There's an exciting energy to it. And so so we crave that, and we equate that with happiness. And so in order to become excellent, or in order to achieve mastery in any particular field, you have to be okay with boredom, and you have to be okay with feeling like you are not progressing. Because and that's when you start to know that you are getting closer to mastery.
I think there's a few things can happen too as you go up the scale, right? And I'm not saying I'm anywhere near the top of it, but I'm just watching others go through this journey as well. And when you get sort of further up, the stakes get a bit higher.
Yeah.
And I know tons that have got to that point, started a few businesses, been successful, major failure.
Right.
And they go, oh, I thought I had this mastery thing sorted. And then they just get a crushing defeat.
Yeah.
And it honestly cost them 5 years.
Yeah. At best.
Right. And I think there's a lot of that goes on.
Yeah.
But I think what also happens is maybe not realizing they're even on that mastery kind of journey. They'd maybe get distracted from it completely.
Yeah.
And lose focus.
Yeah.
Because as you say, it's not very exciting.
No.
But it is, on the little path that I'm on my little mastery journey, I think, incredibly satisfying when you realize, hey, I've just got up a level.
Yeah.
And that just happened.
Yeah.
From feedback or from results or something.
Yeah.
Oh, and confidence in the moment.
Yeah.
Oh, I've taken a little step. Nobody probably knows that except for me.
Right.
How did I get there?
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know. Maybe it's the mix of everything going on around.
And sometimes it's just staying in the game.
It is, yeah. Jack, this has just been fantastic. I'm a little bit conscious of time. We've got a few closing rapid fire questions.
Awesome.
Mate, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. If you could form the ultimate executive team, any well-known leader from any time in history, 3 spots in your team, who would you pick and what role?
It's a very good question. If I could hire anybody,
You can hire anyone. I'll give you the
I would hire Elon Musk as CEO.
Yep.
And then I would pretty much just get out of his way. But if I had a magic wand and I could resurrect anybody, then you'd probably have to appoint Steve Jobs as your CMO.
Oh, yeah.
And I'd say, Elon, I'm giving you Steve, and other than that, go.
Go.
Elon's ecstatically unemployable, but
totally.
in this magical universe that we're dreaming of,
It's a magical universe.
Yeah.
Yes. The best advice a mentor's ever given you?
It's similar to what you were just talking about. I was speaking, a really good friend of mine, a guy called Peter Davidson. We're not sort of in touch as regularly as we should be these days, but he was the seed funder in PayPal. So Elon and Peter Thiel and those guys. And I remember having a conversation with him. This isn't necessarily a succinct piece of advice, but it's one that stays with me for a long time. He lost a lot of respect for money because he said he was pretending to be a VC over in Silicon Valley. In the 90s and 2000s, he saw, all these kids make extraordinary amounts of money, so he lost respect for money. But he said, when you make money, inevitably you will become arrogant. And I said to him, what counteracts that? And he says, it's your first failure after you make it. And that was very true for me.
Yeah. Drink the Kool-Aid, didn't they?
Yeah, and even when he talked, I thought 2 things. I thought, no, I'll never get arrogant. And then I thought, no, I'll never have a failure after. And then I did, and I did.
Yep.
But I think Peter's advice was keep your feet on the ground.
Yeah. I remember that. There's a great quote. It's at the end of The Devil's Apprentice, the movie, which I think is Robert De Niro and
Devil's Advocate?
Devil's Advocate.
Yeah.
The very end after, I think it's De Niro or Pacino. It's Pacino. Sorry, Pacino.
Yeah.
He's walking away and he says, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled
Was convincing the world he doesn't exist." Yeah.
And I always think about that with ego and arrogance and my own Kool-Aid. If I get too much of that, I'm like, oh, mate.
Right. I never made that connection. Yeah, join those dots. That's
what he's
really
talking
powerful.
About. He's talking about
Ego. Interesting.
Yeah. Your number one interview question when getting senior members on your team?
I'm really searching for demonstrable and proven experience in tackling big problems. And so it would be a series of experience-based questions to really tease out whether they had dealt with the problems that they claim to have and how they solved them.
Outstanding. Can you nominate another CEO you have with great respect for the show?
I think you should talk to Stuart Cook. He's a very good friend of mine. He's done an incredibly, a bunch of really good things in business. He'd be great on the show. I think you guys have a good chat.
Can lure him on, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Now, 2 questions to go. If you could lead any company in the world other than your own company, anything you currently own, but I'll give you the keys to the CEO role, what would it be?
I don't think I could do it. Part of what enables me to get through really challenging periods, even when they last for 5 years, is there's nothing else I want to be doing, and so it's a little bit of a cop out, but I honestly couldn't answer the question.
That's fine.
Yeah,
I'll let you off.
yeah.
Okay, mate. A final message of wisdom and hope.
No silver bullets. Better, then more, then different if you must.
Jack, fantastic, mate. A
Thanks,
real pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show.
Appreciate it, mate.
Chiefs, that sums it up for this week in what was a remarkable, energising, inspiring, and just plain awesome chat with Jack Delosa. Chiefs, I encourage you to look up Jack in particular. If you are looking at going out on your own, if you're involved in the rapid growth of business, or even if you just want to think about a different lens about your career and how you can be at your best. Chief, all the links and resources can be found at chiefmaker.com/360. And if you would like to stay in touch and hear all about some of the best resources that you can find anywhere in the world to improve your performance at work, go to chiefmaker.com/subscribe. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chiefs, as always, remember to stay epic.